For our news channel. Of course, there's a lot to talk about. The latest being today, we did get a view of how things are going to be in terms of the transition of the counties with the swearing in of the 47 governors-elect starting Thursday this week. Of course, that is a big story. But what we want to talk about tonight is how Parliament has been shaping up following last week's general election. This including, of course, both levels of Parliament, the National Assembly, the 12th Parliament, how it's going, it's likely to be looking like. Of course, we do have that picture, and of course, the Senate, the second Senate after the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. We will be discussing those numbers, how it is looking like in terms of that proverbial tyranny of numbers in the National Assembly for the Jubilee Party, for the opposition National Super Alliance, how that is likely to be shaping up, as well as just what is new in both houses of Parliament and what to expect for the next few days when the swearing in of the new members of Parliament is likely to happen. Of course, we shall be discussing all those issues and what happened, the trend that we have witnessed from across the 290 constituencies. Many thanks for joining us. I'm now joined by my colleagues, Duncan Haemba and Rosalind Obala from The Standard. Of course, Duncan Haemba is one of my senior political affairs reporters. We're expecting John Girashu to join us in the course of this discussion, as well as former journalist David Ohito. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. First of all, Obala, if you can just tell us, over the next few days, what do we expect? What are some of the procedures we expect for the 12th Parliament to be in place?
We know both coalition side, that is the NASA and also the Jubilee side. We know now there's so much lobbying between the leaders, those who are eyeing the House positions.
Right.
We know that next week, as if at all they'll be sworn in on Tuesday, then we'll also have them also looking at the position of the speakers for both houses. And remember, some of the leadership members who are in the 11th Parliament, some of them went for other positions like governor, others went for Senate, so others lost. Like in the National Assembly on Jubilee side, we lost the entire majority whip and the deputy. Both of them are not in.
Right.
In the Senate, we also have Jubilee, both the majority whip and the deputy are not in the House.
Right.
So far, we've talked to some of them, and they're saying, for Jubilee side, they're saying that they're comfortable with the leadership they had in the 11th Parliament, and they will want to retain the same. But there is a bit of a challenge when it comes to the Senate. We've seen so many people coming in who want, so many people who are coming in who are actually eyeing the Speaker's position. We are not seeing the same in the National Assembly. I don't know why so many people are interested in this position. But again, this is the first time we're also seeing some women also eyeing this same position.
Right.
Yeah.
Duncan, well, what are some of the names that you've had does it have to be a sitting member of Parliament in that Speaker's chair? You can just educate our viewers.
It depends, but it's the deputy that they must be sitting members of either house, be it the Senate or the National Assembly. But for the Speaker, anybody can apply. You remember that that usually has been. We've always had an outsider, save for the 10th Parliament,
right,
where Marende was an elected member of Parliament for Emuhaya. Before he actually he was elected, then he subsequently had to relinquish that position. But talking of what you had asked, what we expect in a couple of days, I've just spoken to Majority Leader Eden Duale, and he says right now they are first of all awaiting gazettement. Now we know that the Gazette note is usually published every Friday. So perhaps if that one is gazetted, then the subsequent step will be the swearing in of members of Parliament, and then now they'll elect the Speaker. This one we are talking about the National Assembly.
Right.
Most probably the Senate will follow the same course, and then that is perhaps when then after that they're expected to go for a recess, and then there will be an induction in between before the President formally opens the 12th Parliament, or or actually addresses will form officially open. Then that is now when we'll have what Obala is talking about now, the lobbying, the horse trading on who gets what. Probably because of the balancing, most positions will be dished out. That would be dishing actually, basing on regional balance, ethnic balancing, because for instance, you cannot have the speaker, a deputy speaker or key now that we have the president and the deputy, because clearly both houses, it's clearly a real tyranny of numbers, unlike what we witnessed in the 11th parliament, whereby they had to have a post-election pact to beef up their numbers. Right now, Jubilee has clear numbers on their side.
All right, let's just take a look at those numbers you're talking about, Duncan. And of course, I have a list here of all the members of the elected members of the National Assembly. That is 335 of them. Remember, 336. Remember, we have the people of Kitutu Churches House did not hold their parliamentary elections, so we don't have the results for that. But this is how it looks like, the House, the National Assembly, the 12th Parliament. From what I can say, I've seen several sets of numbers as people try to lock down on what is really happening. 165, that is the members for the Jubilee Party. That is including, members of Parliament and women representative. Of course, that is all members of the National Assembly. We have a total of 121 from the National Super Alliance. This is including all the 5, that is ODM, Wiper, ANC, CCM, Ford Kenya, as well as Muungano, which has 1 member of Parliament, that is in Makueni. And we have 14 independent candidates in the National Assembly. That is 13 members of Parliament and 1 woman representative. And then we have others, 35. So these are some of the numbers that we'll be seeing, Rosalind. And of course, if I can just break it down further before you continue, in terms of the political parties itself, that is still in the National Assembly. So in terms of the political parties, 165 Jubilee, ODM has 73, Wiper Democratic Movement Kenya has 22 members of the National Assembly, ANC, Musalia Mudavadi's party, has 12 members of Parliament, Ford Kenya has 11, that is a decrease from what was happening in the 11th Parliament. I think they had 18 or so. KANU has done well. It has 10 members of the National Assembly. EFP, Economic Freedom Party, has 5. Maendeleo Chap has 4. PDR Party has 4. KPP has 2. That is in Isiolo, both Isiolo parliamentary units. And then we have Muungano, CCU, DP, PNU, FAP, all which have 1 member of the National Assembly. Rosalind, let me start with you. And of course, we've been joined by John Girashi. John, karibu sana, thanks for joining us. What do you expect from the 12th Parliament, given these numbers? It is a clear real tyranny of numbers, as Duncan put it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting house. We've seen some of the people, seasoned politicians who lost in the 11th Parliament making a comeback in the 12th Parliament. We also saw in the 12th Parliament it was mostly about the tyranny of numbers, and we are seeing they've even added their numbers. They are going to be more this time around as compared to the numbers of the minority side. So again, with that, we expect so much that the activities will be mostly tilted towards the government, because again, to pass something, it's all about the numbers that we have in the House. We expect that the leadership that will come from the opposition side, the people that they will settle on, are people that will be able to whip and rally even the people from the majority side to agree with some of the things that they are going to push in the House. Right. But actually, it's going to be a very interesting House since the numbers favor the government side. Right.
John, some pundits have said that this clear tyranny of numbers is going to be bad for Kenya as a democracy, in that it is going to be almost like dictatorship, so to speak, that the opposition will never have anything move in Parliament. What is your take on this?
Yeah, there's a possibility of Parliament becoming or enabling bad governance, if that is the intention. Because with a clear strength in numbers, a clear domination in numbers, they will be in a position to pass and to allow anything that the executive, or rather the president, wants. So there is that possibility. But we must not forget that we also have a fairly good judiciary now, which we can rely on to provide that balance, check and balance,
Right.
in case they pass any bad laws or they do anything that is contrary to the Constitution. So while it may be a party in which the majority is too strong for the opposition, but we shouldn't lose, though. I don't think we should lose hope. Yeah.
All right, Duncan, what do you think?
I want to agree, but also disagree, because unlike in the 11th Parliament, Jubilee had, that is TN and URP, they signed a post-election pact that was binding. Right now, we've seen others that are 35, we've seen 14 that are independent, and then against 121 NASA, and then 165 Jubilee. So unless Jubilee gets hold of independent ones, then gets hold of the other 35, then they sign a post-election pact that they will work as a tag team, then we can't expect that maybe government will have real Tyranny of Numbers. For instance, if the 35 and the independent ones combine to throw their weight behind NASA, then they will actually surpass Jubilee numbers. Or if the independent ones, let's say half-half, half will side with NASA and then half with Jubilee, and then of the 35, that will have some that will decide that they are more comfortable with the opposition, then the government might be put in checks. But the danger, as Ngirashu says, if Jubilee will have the intention to have their way, as they've had in the 11th Parliament, then we will have crippled opposition in the 12th Parliament.
You don't agree with what Duncan is saying?
Yeah. Duncan is forgetting that a fair bit of the independent MPs are not really independent.
I think there's only one independent MP, that is Patrick Musimba of Kibwezi West.
I think he's the only one who's demonstrated independence. But the rest, we know, like... I have in mind someone like who? Like the MP for Thika Town, Patrick Wenaina, Jango. He lost in the Jubilee nominations, allegedly unfairly to Alice Nganga, and he was able to solidify his own support as an individual and come back. You will not expect Patrick Wenaina, and I don't want to speak on his behalf, to oppose the Jubilee party.
Right.
In fact, my theory is that we'll have a very boring parliament. In fact, a very boring National Assembly, because unless the opposition resorts to, extraordinary measures, which it has done before.
Rosalind, what do you think? Because like John is saying, most of these guys lost in either one of the nominations for the major parties and became independent. Are they likely to follow those positions, even though that they're independent? Or do the parties need to whip them, the lobbying that you're talking about?
I know the parties need to whip them, but you remember the IBC Chebukati team, the Code of Conduct Committee, there were so many cases that came before them of independent candidates having either one of the presidential candidates besides their posters. And that just tells you that wherever they were running, they were either aligned to a particular coalition of the party, either Jubilee or NASA. So in this case, even those who won, like I think the one who has won the woman representative in Meru, you don't expect her to go and side, you don't expect her to come and side with NASA, because that is a Jubilee stronghold. So just what Ngirashu was saying, it's actually going to be very difficult unless the opposition side comes with a leadership that is assertive, as what we witnessed with the Jubilee side. I think in the last parliament, the opposition side, the leadership was a bit laid back, and that is why it gave the government side an upper hand. So in this case, they really need to check very well the kind of leaders they will appoint to those leadership positions.
But I think we need to be alive to the fact that the phase we are headed in is a phase of succession. The president will not be standing again in 2022. His deputy will be fronted to succeed him. If at all there will be supremacy wars or other people that within Jubilee themselves that they would want to contest to run against the deputy president, clearly they might sponsor sort of some division. So the fact that we are headed into a season of succession for the president, that could also be a factor, because it will all be about numbers. For instance, if there will be somebody or people who will feel like they want to inherit President's central region, and that's the Mount Kenya region, and perhaps lobby the members, that might cause some cracks within Jubilee. So that will be a danger. So if succession politics will crop up at an early stage, and like when maybe you expect them in 2021, then it might have some effect, because you remember at some point with some cracks or even emerging URP TNA midway until the whip was cracked. So
True.
we cannot rule out the possibility of succession politics that might also throw a spanner in the works in the Jubilee Party.
All right. Let's talk about the performance of these guys in the just concluded elections. Rosalind, what would you say are your surprises in this National Assembly in terms of how these political parties performed? Maendeleo Chapchap has 4 members of parliament. I don't know, what are some of your surprises, and who disappointed in as far as what was expected, prior to the general election?
I think there are some people that if you've seen either they've lost their seats, and if you gauge with what they used to do in the House, I think, again, it's also a shift within the electorate, whereby it doesn't matter what you do in Parliament. What matters is what you do at the ground, because there are very powerful people in that House that have actually been sent home. There are others who have found their way to Parliament, and actually from where you sit, you wonder how they will represent their electorate. But there they are, they've made their way in. So for me, I don't think it's so much about what you do. It's about your party loyalty, how you're loyal to the party leader or the party you are in, the way you are with the entire structure of the party. And if you're independent, how did you play your game to dislodge somebody who had the party ticket?
Right.
So with that, I think so much the people are changing more of representation as opposed to legislation.
All right.
Yeah.
Duncan, maybe you can mention how we had senators who wanted to vie for the National Assembly,
Yes.
especially nominated senators. How are they fared?
It will be interesting now that we have 2 senators that have converted into members of the National Assembly, and they are coming in against the backdrop of the supremacy wars between the 2 houses. Which one is upper than the other? I know Rosaline will attack us with Ngirashi because she purports to speak for that house. She reports for the Senate. But I think it will be interesting to see what will be the paradigm, what will be different in terms of the articulation. Like Martha Wangare for Gilgil, she's been very vocal. We've seen how she's actually performed very well in the Senate. Now in the National Assembly, what exactly will she be bringing in to change? Remember when I did an interview with shifting allegiance, or them shifting base from the Senate to the National Assembly, they had a clear mandate. Of course, that time we were looking at Elachi, we were looking at Lesuda, we were looking at Martha, and they said they know where the loopholes were and why the National Assembly appeared to be suppressing the Senate. So it will be interesting to see now that they're in the National Assembly, if they will rescue their former home, or now they'll join up the gang in the National Assembly, which was seen as the bully to the Senate.
Right. Girasho?
I think we moved on from supremacy wars. Personally, I don't find them worth reporting because I think the question of which house is busier, I consider it busier, and which house is favored in the architecture of the Constitution is clear. So it's not really.
So
I don't find it really worth.
That the Senate Nyumba was there.
No.
I don't find it worth going into. To say this is a house for old people, this is a house for young people. Let's think of them in terms of which is the busier house. For me, the house that gives me a lot of news to write about is the National Assembly. But the Senate also handles very weighty issues, like the impeachment of a governor. That's a big issue.
Right.
You cannot say that it's a small house when it handles such a big issue. Equally, the National Assembly handles most of the budget. you see, you cannot say it's a lower house when it handles such a significant issue.
Right.
So for me, supremacy was, I think, an old story.
All right.
An old story we used to write about.
I've never agreed with Ngirasho on that because he tends to always see that house should not exist. But for me, yes, but from where I sit, and I've always argued this, I think we need to blame our drafters because the Senate was supposed to have been a second house of reason, because there are so many laws that have come from the National Assembly that if actually they pass through the Senate, then we will not be going to the courts to seek reprieve.
Right.
And even in terms of the budget that he's talking about, how many times have the two houses have a back and forth? It is because the National Assembly has never given the Senate the position to speak in terms of the counties. And that is why they purport to speak on behalf of the counties and dictate how much they need to get and the amount that they need to get. Even in terms of the function that the Senate are supposed to do, they've always gone and repealed the sections. Like, remember the vetting of the IG? You remember it had to be something that they had to fight the Senate to have an opportunity to also vet the IG. So these are the issues. When he says the National Assembly is busy, why do they change the laws to be the only ones to consider things that are supposed to be undertaken by Parliament and not National Assembly?
All right. Interesting conversation. I want us to take a quick commercial break. When we return, we shall be speaking about the Senate, that is the second house that we are talking about. We shall be speaking about the performance of women in the just concluded general election, the parliamentary elections, that is. We shall be taking a look at the parties. We have talked about the numbers in the House, but how are they spread out across the country? Which counties have which colors? That is what we shall be talking about when we come back after this quick commercial break. You're watching Kivumbi 2017. Our post-election analysis continues. We are focusing on the National Assembly and the Senate, how Parliament is likely to look like in the next 5 years. Don't go too far.
This is KTN News.